So just to start things off, for readers who may not be familiar with Learn It Live and the session you held, can you just give a quick summary as to what you did and what the session was about?
Sure, the session I hosted was called SharePoint 2010, Get It Right the First Time. And it really just talked about some of the common pitfalls for implementing SharePoint within your business and how you can avoid it just by doing a little bit of research and just by overcoming some of the challenges that other people have already, been able to overcome.
Okay, that sounds good. So, I mean, SharePoint is used for lots of businesses to streamline productivity, efficiency, and the likes. What do you think would be the next upcoming program? Probably just maybe a venture by a different company, or it's just simple software that will do what SharePoint is doing right now, or maybe just even go up like above and beyond.
Sure. As proposal and collaboration lead over at CTS, it's my job to kind of make sure that I'm on the cutting edge of things. And I've noticed that Microsoft is doing a great job when it comes to just collaboration and enterprise search especially. Because right now you have a lot of people who are going paperless with their technologies, right? Which means they have to have a way to find all that stuff because now it's all on a hard drive rather than in a file share somewhere, instead of a file cabinet somewhere. So between kind of just tweaking SharePoint to the point where it just works better for you as a business and bring in other pieces such as, like social pieces like Yammer, which if you're familiar with Yammer, Yammer is basically a social media application that lives in the cloud, but it's isolated to your particular business. So you can have microblogging and things like that centered around all of your collaboration needs, whether it's like...
So SharePoint's a great platform for business to streamline productivity and efficiency, and I guess it's just one of the main ways that businesses are looking to connect within and with other businesses. What do you think would be a great addition that could be made to SharePoint, some upgrades, or maybe just another program that's up and coming that will take over the market?
Sure. There are a lot of additions to SharePoint. Most of it just comes down to licensing. One of the major ones, of course, is fast search, which just allows you to have a richer enterprise search experience with your portal. So instead of the basic search with, of course, search results and maybe a couple of facets, it actually gives you a heck of a lot more functionality, such as document previews and being able to walk through those within your search result set. It also gives you federated search and some other things. Along the same line of search, you also have some of your integration with Yammer. And for those not familiar, Yammer is a social networking piece that actually works mainly for businesses. It's still a cloud function, a piece of cloud functionality, but it's isolated to your business. So all of the actual microblogging and search results and all that stuff actually comes from the content is driven by your organization, which makes it very unique considering that a lot of people are using Facebook and some other tools like Twitter or whatever that really don't isolate things to your business specifically. So I think that those two pieces especially do augment the SharePoint stack rather well.
So, I mean, you mentioned Yammer, you mentioned Twitter, Facebook, the integration of social media. Social media has very much changed the way things are worked right now. I would say that social media has revolutionized the idea of marketing and connectivity within the workplace, within the world. So with all these connections, with the development of SharePoint, the development of technologies, and the acquisition of video conferencing technologies such as Skype by Microsoft, where do you see this technology taking connections and the ability to work? Where do you see this going over the next few years?
Sure. I think that especially when it comes to the acquisition of Skype, for instance, I think that just means that you're going to see Skype in Windows 8. It's one of those things where now people are so used to having applications like Skype and Facebook and Twitter that it's just going to be part of your OSs at one point or another. It's going to come to the point where every time you buy a laptop, all these things are already going to be preloaded. It's going to be a no-brainer. Just like when you saw Microsoft Connect for Xbox, one of the first things they put into it, which is one of the really underused features, was video conferencing. But of course at the same time, you don't necessarily talk to all of your buddies online face to face. You usually talk to them, more on audio sense when it comes to sharing information and playing games together. But let's say if you did have two families that had Xboxes, then you could easily, turn that on during the holidays. Or, just looking at apps that are integrated into your TV for the same purposes. I mean, now you have an entire app store where it's just applications for your TV. whether it's Pandora, Skype, or what have you. So a lot of this is going to be prevalent moving into the future, and it's going to be a no-brainer as to what's available to you and being able to get off and running. You're not going to be cutting edge if you're using Skype anymore. It's just going to be an average thing like your Facebook address. Between Yammer and maybe a few other things, I mean, you always see a lot of people using Twitter now, for better or worse, right? But, internally, I use Twitter just for, publicizing work events. I'm a strong proponent in the SharePoint user group, so I'll, tweet stuff about SharePoint or about that particular user group and sector. But we also have recruiters who use it pretty regularly just to, kind of have that spot check and send out, a lot of information to a lot of different individuals. But I think that social media is really going to play a big part, because then that goes back to our enterprise search conversation, where you can actually have people rate their content and make it more meaningful. Because it's one thing for, the man or whoever you have in your organization to tell you to use this template. It's another thing for people to start rating their content and saying, hey, this stuff is actually useful to me, rather than what the company wants you to see.
Okay. As we've talked about social media, we've talked about how SharePoint is streamlining the connectivity within businesses. What do you believe the typical business model will look like after the implementation of technology? Twitter, the way social media is changing the entire market, the way SharePoint is changing the market. What do you think the typical business model will be like within the next 10 years?
I think it's really just going to encompass all those things. And because right now, for instance, our engineers touch SharePoint every single day. All their documents live in SharePoint. They don't store anything on their laptops, hopefully, but it's kind of hard to get around that. But really, they have to touch SharePoint in one way, shape, or form. And it's just going to become part of the company culture, where instead of emailing documents around or what have you, you're going to tell people to go look at the portal first. And that's really going to be the mindset that you have to get past, is that a lot of companies don't work that way right now. But hopefully with products like SharePoint and, some people even using Facebook or even some of the Google Cloud functionality, you'll be able to kind of point more towards those collaboration hubs rather than a share on a network somewhere.